2 American soldiers and at least 15 Iraqis were killed in a wave of weekend bombings, mostly in Baghdad. The violence comes as the last British troops withdraw from Iraq, and the U.S. with the U.S. set to pull out of the rest of its forces by the end of the year. CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Lara Logan joins us now from Washington with an update on this. Lara, good morning to you.
Good morning, Chris. Well, it appears this has been a deadly weekend in Iraq, and the question looming over everybody is how the country will hold together after U.S. forces pull out.
What does this say about the stability there in Iraq at present with this increased violence, often targeting police forces?
That it's very fragile. I mean, it's not a surprise the police forces are targeted. They're the ones who are out there on the street. They're easy targets in a sense, and they're usually not as well disciplined or well trained as the army. But what this really points to is the fact that, you know, the surge was only an illusion of peace and security in Iraq. It's very, very fragile. And in fact, the country with the most influence there now is Iran. And that's what's really playing out here is a fight between Iran, the U.S., and the Sunni-Shia divide.
The Iraqi forces there, are they properly equipped to handle the country when U.S. forces finally leave?
Well, they're equipped to handle the country as they've always handled it. And the real question is why the U.S. should even think about staying in Iraq when the Iraqi government has made it very clear that they're not willing to ask them to stay. And where politicians in the Iraqi parliament say it is political suicide to even suggest that you want the Americans to stay. So in that kind of climate, what is to be gained for the U.S. from risking its soldiers' lives and forcing its presence on the Iraqi people?
Well, I guess the next question is, what would you think about this, the timeline that's in place right now? There's about 46,000 U.S. troops that are still in Iraq right now. Right at this point, the withdrawal is scheduled for December. Yesterday, British troops, after 8 years, they withdraw completely from Iraq. Is this timeline, is it still on course? Do you see a sense of shift that maybe U.S. forces may need to stay longer?
Well, the timeline is still on course, that's for sure. In fact, Secretary of Defense Bill Gates has said that U.S. forces can only stay if invited to do so by the Iraqi government. And what's complicating all of this, Chris, is that it takes months and months and months to withdraw your forces, to dismantle these bases. There's a massive amount of infrastructure there. And the U.S. has to plan for that. They have to pay for that. And so, you know, if the Iraqis are going to, at the last minute, say, oh, you know, we changed our minds, we want you to stay, that's going to cost an absolute fortune in taxpayer dollars. And for the Iraqis, it's a political game. For the U.S. military planners, they want to know exactly what they're doing. But I'll tell you something that happened recently that really is pause for thought. A mass grave was found outside the city of Fallujah, and the instant reaction of the Iraqi government was to blame the U.S. forces who fought in Fallujah several years ago in that famous battle in Iraq, and basically accuse the U.S. soldiers of killing a massive number of civilians and dumping their bodies in a mass grave. The real question Americans should be asking is, why are we considering staying behind in a country where the government accuses us of that kind of massive war crime or crime against humanity? And the answer to that question lies in the relationship between the Maliki government and Iran, and that is really what's at stake here. Is what is playing out in the region with Iran, who now has a stronger foothold in Iraq than they ever have. And it's really, it's up to the Iraqis at this point to sort out how they want those relationships to settle.
All right, CBS's Lara Logan in Washington for us this morning. Lara, thank you.